Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and in today's episode we are going to be looking at how we can automate this simple form. So we're going to be making use of Python and Selenium, okay? So before we delve into business, let's quickly look at why we are doing this, okay? So this is a basic form, it's quite simple. However, when you have to do this all over and over again, then it becomes complex. Okay, so take for instance, we have this Excel sheet of data we need to enter. So that means we need to fill in 10 data. So filling two might actually be quite an easy task. However, when it gets to 10, 20, then it becomes tiring. Okay. So at this point, you probably want to employ the use of your computer. You want to employ the use of automation. So one of the major ways you can or things to consider when or one of the pointer as to when you want to automate the process is when you are doing something all over and over again, something that is following the same flow, something that is similar. Okay. So if there is a structure, then you probably want to automate it. So it doesn't just have to be with the form. However, we'll be making use of this as a sample. All right. So with that said, let's quickly explore the tools. So here is the Selenium page. I'll put this in the description so that we can always go through to see. And Selenium is not Python dependent. It's not just for Python. We have it in other programming language like that. However, we are looking at the Python's Selenium. So Selenium is a tool, it's a package that allows us to interact with our web browser automatically. So that's what it does. So every activity human being does on your web browser, Selenium can help you replicate that. So the first thing you want to probably take note of is how to install it, and here is how to do that. So you can just have Python and pip install Selenium, and that should install it. So you can either have it in your virtual environment or install it globally. However, I have installed this globally, and I would assume I would want to use it in the future, so I don't need to start creating a virtual environment for that. And once you are done installing Selenium, you need to also work with the drivers as well, because you need to open different browsers, and based on that they have different drivers to use. So from the context you can see here, Selenium works with Chrome, Edge, Firefox and Safari, and for each we have the drivers. So for the case study today, we'll be making use of Chrome, so you can always get the Chrome driver. I already have it, and one pointer I would like us to take notice: when you are downloading the driver, ensure that it's the same version with the Chrome you have installed. So take note, we have the version 90, we have version 89, and so on. So to verify the Chrome version you have, you can come down to the help and access the Google Chrome. So it's going to show you the version here, as you can see, and this is 89.04. So based on that, this is what you want to download. So download this, and we are going to get back to that. So that's literally it about the tools required to have your automation in place. And this is where you are going to be seeing the response. So we'll get back to that. So let's now access our code to implement this. So we have a clean sheet. I created a folder for form automation. Then I created a file with the file name. And as you can see, here is what we have so far. And also I've brought in the user info CSV we are going to be automating here. So here is it. And let's get started. So first thing first, we want to import the WebDriver. So from all right, so here is the WebDriver, and with the WebDriver we can literally do so much. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to define the driver. So here is where you are going to specify your Chrome driver location. So let's define the driver. All right, so take note, we are specifying Chrome here. So you have a choice of choosing other browsers if you want. We have the Firefox, we have the Edge, we have the Safari. However, I will go ahead to choose Chrome. And what this takes is the location to your driver. Okay, so this is going to be a URL. So let's locate the driver itself. And here, Chrome driver 32, and here. So here is the driver. I need to find the path to this location. And with Windows, I can just come down here, copy this, and come back here to put it in. So just to update, I'll change this to a forward slash. Alright, so I've changed that to forward slash. However, the path is not yet complete. So this is just the path to the executable. The executable is not yet there. So we need the executable itself. And that's this. So we can just copy the name here and add the exe extension to it. So chrome driver.exe. Alright, so that's the second part. So we defined our driver here. So with this, when we run the app, it's going to try to open up the, or rather, we've not gotten to that part. So the next part is to specify the URL you want to open up. So let's just have that within a variable. And if we come back to the form, here is the URL, so we can make use of that. So here is the URL to our form. And if you want, you can always get the short form, but that won't be necessary. So here is the URL. The next thing now is to open this URL up, and we can use the driver to do that. So we have driver.get, then the URL. So with these few lines, we are going to be able to open this form. So all we have to do is have Python, then the file name, which is fillform.py. And as you can see, this opened the form. So that's the first step to this. All right, so we can close this now. So the next part now is to interact with the form, is to fill in the information we want. And this interaction, I will define this within a separate function. So let's have the fill form. So that's the function I'm going to have. And if it should be fill underscore form. I think that's the pattern for Python. And the form is going, the function is going to take in the first name, literally our parameters. So we have the first name, the last name, the gender, and the age, literally what we need to put in. So next now is to access the input fields. Okay, so to access the input fields, we can just have this. So I'll show us how I come around about this, but let's have it first. So inputs equals to driver dot find elements. So it's going to be elements and not elements. Elements mean one. So look for the one with S. So this one, elements by class name. And the class name we want to look for is this. So let's go back to how I come about this. So if we try to inspect this, we are going to see what this is made up of. And here is the class name. So sometimes you probably want to just target a particular context. And maybe, for instance, the input field here has a name or an affiliation with first name. So you probably want to just search with name. But from the inputs, as you can see it here, let me zoom in. So it doesn't have a name, and you can't really use anything to tie it up to being a first name. And the funny thing is that most of the inputs are related, so they are quite the same thing. Okay, so instead, what I will do is just get the class name, and after getting the class name, provided that they are going to be sequentially arranged, so it's going to be first name before last name, then we can still work with whatever we want to do. Okay, so that's it with getting the input field. So now we have the input field, and before we can move on to the next stage, let's also get the radio field. So also we need the radio, and they don't share the same information. So let me inspect this so that we get an idea. So here is the radio contents, as you can see here. And we can still actually narrow it down to maybe this or this. However, I'm going to make use of this because it has more information about the radio that I would need. And the information I'm looking out here is the data value. So as you can see, the data value contains the value of the radio button. Okay, so based on that, I'll just stick with this. And from here, I need the class name as well. So let me just copy that part that I need. So I'll just duplicate this, change this to the radio class name, then replace the name. So this becomes radio. So radio buttons rather. So those are the two inputs we need. So if you have more inputs, I guess you have a way to always inspect it and get your information. All right. So now after having the inputs defined, so the next thing now is to try to add input our content. So one thing I've noticed is that if you try to immediately input our content, there's possibility that those inputs might not be ready to take in any information or be interactable. So what I've seen to be the best practice is to delay a little bit. So I can import time, and after importing time, I can delay a little. So time dot sleep, and I think 1 second is just perfect. So however, this is dependent on my network. I'm not sure if it's going to be like that for every network. So you can always see what works best for you. But for me, 1 seconds was quite okay. So next is to access our input. So based on the information we have on the input, we can assume that input into 0 is going to be our first name. However, I don't want to now have input into 0 equals to first name, input into 1 equals to no. I want to have it the programmer way, okay? So what I would do in this case is I can just have an inputs array. So this is going to take in the information we want to store. Okay, so input array, we are going to have the first name, the last name, then the age. Okay, so we are not considering the gender because it's not part of the input, it's just a lone data on its own. So now with the input array defined, we can now look through our inputs and just access the index to update our data. So inputs, or rather for index, so we want to access the index. So for I, so now we have I in range length of input. So take notes. So we are looping through the inputs and we are getting the index. So based on that, that means input of I, so provided I is at 0, then that's first name. So that's the point. So input of I, we want to clear it first. So you want to clear in case there was a data. So after clearing, then we can send in our data. So to send in data, we just have send keys, then the data. And in this case, the data is going to be inputs array into the index of 0, or rather index of I. All right, so with this, we should be able to fill in our inputs. So before we proceed, let's just see how this works. So let's clear this and let's run it again. All right, so we didn't get any information. That means something is wrong. So let's see. All right, so obviously that won't work. That's because we've not called the form fill form itself. So this is just a form and we've really not called it at all. So let's call the function. So fill form, then we specify the parameters. So we have added family. And the gender, even though it's not necessary yet, let's send it as well. Then we have the age, that's 23. All right, so let's see how this will work. So let's run it again. All right, so now we get in our information. We have the name, we have the last name, and we have the age. So what's left now is the gender. So let's undo that. So remember, we access the information of our radio button based on a container that contains the data type and the data value, and that's what we want to use to know what we are checking. Okay, so also let's look through the radio buttons. So for radio, okay, so we are looping through individual values of the radio buttons, so not the index in this time around. And we want to check that the attribute name, the data value, is equivalent to the gender. So if that's the case, then we want to check it. So to do that, we can have our if statement, we can access the radio, then we can get the attributes. So get attributes, and this is going to be data value. So that's what we are checking. However, remember in our data value that the content is actually capitalized. As you can see, the first value is a capital letter. However, we want to work with small letter, and that means whatever we are sending will be in small letter. Okay. So what we can do is we can just pass this to a lower, then we can verify if it's equivalent to the gender. So if this is equivalent to the gender, then we want to just click it. And that's how to interact with a radio button. So just click it. Alright, so that's done. We've clicked it, and with this, we should have our radio button working. Okay, let's actually check this out before we proceed. So let's run. Alright, so as you can see, that seems to be working. So all that is left now is to be able to submit and add other information. Alright, so to handle the submit, I actually had an issue with this when I first checked it out, and I saw a better way to handle the submit button. So I just show us this. So to get the submit button, this seems to be the best way to target the button itself. So we are using xpath in this scenario. And if you want to check more information about how to access or find elements, you can always go back to this Selenium web page to check this. So we're using the xpath, and we're getting all this information. So based on that, we're able to get the submit. And once we are done filling our information, we want to submit. So submit dot click, and that's the way to submit. And also, once we are done and we can still fill in more information, then we want to wait a little. So take note, submit is going to be an asynchronous operation. So we want to ensure that we've gotten to the page where we can click add another response before we actually click it. And also, I've find out that the best way to do this is to just make use of this. So wait until this. So I get access to this class name also while testing this out, and this seems to be okay. Okay. So I will encourage us to make use of this, and or we can always look for a better way. But I think this is going to work well. All right, so but now we have some issues. We have some imports to undo. So let's just get those imports. And yeah, to we have the imports here. So we are importing EC, we are importing guide, and we are importing WebDriver weights. Okay. So here is the import location. We can always check that out. And based on that, everything should be active now. And also, just like the submit button, we are going to also get the location for the link to add other response. And here is the link. Okay. So I will do us a favor and add all this information to the description so that we can easily make use of it. So the whole essence of this tutorial is so that we can make life easy for each other. We can understand best practice of doing most of these things. Okay. Then if we've waited, so the idea is that we want to wait until this particular class is available. And if that class is available, that means we should be able to get this particular element. And once we have that element, we want to add another response. So add another response dot click. All right. So now, even though this might be cool, because we are trying to add another response, there might be a loop, and it will just try to get back to this part. I want to wait another minute to ensure that another content is available on the screen. And the content I want to wait for is the export button content. So that's the export button we use to submit, by the way. But this is another way of accessing it. I just felt that the expert here is the best way of accessing it. Okay. So we want to wait just as we did with this. So this is waiting 30 milliseconds. I think yeah, that's milliseconds. That should be it. And we should have our information before we know it. So sometimes those all this might not be necessary, but this is just a safe fallback so that we don't encounter some issues. And with this in place, we should be able to fill in our form. Right, so let's check it out. Let's run it. So as you can see, we were able to fill that form, and it created a chance to add other response. Okay, so that's the flow. So let's see the response we added. So we added one response and this is what it looks like. So mail goes to this. So as you can see, that's working already. So what's left now is for us to be able to automate our CSV file. And that's actually quite simple. So let's do that. So to handle that, we need access to CSV. So it's also a module in Python. Then we can comment out this for now. And the first thing we want to define here is the file. So we want to open the file. And yeah, the file is just located here. So we can just have user info.csv. Alright, so once we've opened the file, we want to read the file as a CSV file. So we have reader equals to csv.reader, and it's going to take in the file followed by the delimiter. So delimiter, and the delimiter is a comma. Okay, then now the reader is an array inside another array. Okay, so array of rows. Alright, so what we can do now is we can look through the array. So for row in reader, and take note, for each row we have this particular info separated by comma. So each row is an array of all these elements. So Adefemi, the first name, is going to be the first index. So index 0, index 1, index 2, and index 3. That's the structure. And if we want, we can always output this to see what we get. So let's actually output this. So for row in reader, print row. Then let me just print so that we can demarcate it. Alright. So let's run this. Alright, so now it has printed the information. As you can see, it's just an array of contents. So that means index 0 is the first value and so on. Alright, so that's done. So what we can do next is we can make use of the function call here. And we just replace necessary parts. So we have Adefemi, and this will change to row 0. Then we change for the other part as well. So this one will be 1, this will be 2, and this will be 3. Alright, so that's the call, and with this we should be able to automate our contents. But it makes sense to just have a feedback as to when we are done. So let's have a print of completed. So completed. Then we can close the tab. So as you can see, as we've noticed so far, whenever we try to run this, it's going to open a new tab for our browser. So we can always close that once we are done. So driver close. And yeah, that's all we have. Let's check this out. And it has started. So let's observe. Alright, so there we have it, as you can see. And yeah, let's take a look at the responses we got so far. So as you can see, we got the 10 responses we defined, and we can always do all sorts of comparison from here. So this is just a show out, or rather a showcase of how we can make use of Selenium. It has more use case more than this, so it has more use case than this. But I guess we can always start from somewhere. And in the future, if I can always, and in the future, if I happen to pinpoint a use case that will be beneficial, I will be happy to share with us. So before I go, I would appreciate if we enjoy the tutorial. So it's an if scenario. I won't recommend we like something we don't enjoy. However, if we enjoy it and we think it's going to benefit other people, then I think we should like it. And if you've not subscribed, let's try to subscribe. I would try to bring in more important information in the future. All right, guys, see you in the next one. Bye.